Hey, I'm Susan Ruff, and I am going to talk about how to give a seminar talk. Your options are to do this remotely. Your options are to use slides. I recommend doing that, frankly, because learning how to give a slide math talk is a valuable skill. But you also have the option of doing something like a chalk talk. If you want to do a chalk talk, so that'll be the focus of today, is how to do a chalk talk remotely. If you want to do a chalk talk, if you have a tablet, that's great. But if you don't have a tablet, you can use paper. And that's the focus of today, how to use paper for a remote chalk talk. So we'll talk about doing pre-written paper talks or recording as you write on the paper or recording as you write on a mini whiteboard, with the focus being recording as you write on the paper, because that's the trickiest one. The setup that I'm using right now is, I'll show it to you, like this. So it has three relevant parts. There's the surface that you write on, there are the pillar supports, and then there's the thing that holds the camera. The pillar supports, I'm using books, and that's really handy because it helps you adjust the height so that when you point the screen at the paper, it's the right size, so the paper fills the screen the way you want it to. So books are really handy for that. For the support for the camera, what I'm using is, I'll show you without quite such a distracting background, I'm using two coat hangers, and there are lots of options. You'll see more in a moment. The two coat hangers I have attached together just by taping them together here and here and here, and that winds up being plenty sturdy. And then if I were to just put my camera on the coat hangers, it would fall off too easily. So I've also put this camera holder on it, and that camera holder is just a cracker box cut in half. When I cut the cracker box in half, what happened was it started to fall apart, as you'll see on this other half. So all I did was I taped the corner to reinforce it. And then I cut out a notch for the camera to point through. And so that's working pretty well. A few subtleties about how to make the writing legible on the writing surface. You want it to be well lit. I am fortunate enough to have this lamp that I can point wherever I want, and that works great. But I'll show you what you can do if you don't have that. So I'm going to turn that lamp off, and notice the problem. The problem is that because I have the room light on, and actually it's not as much of a problem right now as it was before, but you can see that there's the shadow of my hand, and there's also the shadow of the pillar. And depending on various things, those shadows can be pretty problematic. So a solution is to have only one light source in the room. I'm going to have as my light source the windows. So I'm going to turn off the overhead light. And this setup is facing the windows so that the pillars, the support pillars, will not cast a shadow on the paper. And you'll see that actually works pretty well. Those shadows are not too bad. Another thing about legibility is, so here's what pencil and pen and marker look like. The pencil and the pen are legible, but marker is much more legible. So if you have marker, I recommend that you use it. Another thing to be aware of is that if your table is not sturdy as you write, the table may jiggle, and if your camera is supported by the table, your camera is going to jiggle too. If that is such an issue that it's problematic, there are some other options. But a theme of this is going to be, don't be a perfectionist. If it's just a little jiggling, it's probably fine. But if jiggling is an issue, the strategy is to have the camera supported by something different than what you're writing on, or else to write on a really sturdy surface. This was my first way of setting up this writing on paper, and it was really quick and easy. It's just 2 chairs with, these are snow pickets, because I recently led a glacier travel course where I taught people how to protect themselves on glaciers and steep snow, and this is what we use for that. So I had these lying around, and they work really well for this. So what you can do is just put something across the chairs and then write on the floor. Now, writing on the floor gets a bit old, especially if you have a 25-minute presentation, but it does work. If this is what you need to do, you can go ahead and do it. But another option, if you want sturdiness and to be able to sit as you write, is to have your writing surface be separate from the surfaces that are holding the camera. So here I have a filing cabinet with books on it, I have some storage boxes with books on them, and then I have a side table that I'm using as my writing surface. And so this, if that side table jiggles, the camera is not going to jiggle. Notice here what I have is a whiteboard that I got at the local drugstore, and that works really well too. This is it was in the stationery section by the kids' supplies, like over by the crayons. Oh, and by the way, what I'm using to support, use whatever you have around. I happen to have lying around, my grandmother carved a bow and arrows. So that's the bow on the couch. It's gorgeous. And these are the arrows, and that works too. So use whatever you have lying around. In fact, curtains are hung on curtain rods. If you get permission from the person you're staying with, you may be able to use those curtain rods to support your phone if you want to. So all of those setups were for if you are going to write, if you want to be able to record while you're writing. Let me show you, if you do that, you want to be able to set the paper up with enough room for your hand so that as you're writing on the right side of the paper, if you're right-handed, you'll have room to do that. So just play with it and you'll figure out the spacing. But you don't have to record as you write. Another option is to pre-write your papers. And if you do that, then it's much simpler because you don't have to have the setup for the camera. You can just hold the camera with one hand. That will get old with a 25-minute presentation, but it works. Avoid, though, the temptation to go too fast, because if you pre-write, and this is a problem for slides too, if you pre-write, it's really easy, especially if you're a little nervous, to just go really quickly and say, okay, you're all familiar with this statement. We're going to do the familiar theorem where you write this out twice, backwards once, you add the individual terms, there are n of them, and so you get n times n plus 1. Because you added twice, you have to divide by 2, and that's the answer. Any questions? That's too fast. So be aware of your audience's needs and make yourself slow down, whether you're doing a pre-written paper talk or a slide talk. So let's go back to what's important. I've talked about a lot of technical things of how you can actually do this, but really the question is, what's the point? The point is to help your classmates understand the math. So let's talk about how the process changes from what it used to be. You may all be familiar with this from the start of the semester. This was the process for preparing a chalk talk. The process is the same now. First, learn the content. You can do that with the help of your course lead still. Your course lead ought to have by now set up avenues of communication, but they probably include phone, email, Zoom conference. If you have any questions about the content, set up a meeting with your course lead to make sure you understand the content. Then identify takeaways. What does your audience need to know about the content? Again, the course lead can help you there. Craft the talk to help your classmates get the takeaways. The focus here is not on how are you going to have paper suspended below your camera and get good lighting. The focus here is help your classmates to learn the math. And you can best help them do so if you engage them in thinking about the math. So think about asking rhetorical questions and making it interesting. Plan ahead how you're going to deliver the talk so that your classmates get the takeaways, and that includes planning what you're going to write and practicing. Feel free to send a practice video to your course lead for feedback. If I'm your communication instructor, feel free to send a video to me also for feedback, and then revise, and then record the actual presentation. Don't be a perfectionist. This is not a videography class, it's a math class. It's okay if the lighting isn't perfect as long as it's legible. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Good luck and take care of yourselves. Bye.